I don't even have to ask them to come up. They're already here. That's awesome. We know we're running a little behind, so we'll go ahead and jump right into the panel questions. And Dirk, you answered so much of what we would ask right there, the who, the where, the when. So how about the how much? What does Cleveland have to do to become part of this list?
Well, Cleveland is already part of the list, right? So we're working. I don't think it's a matter of money, because again, one of the most important parts for us is to build something that makes economic sense. So there's plenty of money out there. There are plenty of investors out there. As long as they get their money back, there's plenty of infrastructure funds that would be happy to fund this. It's more regulatory. Of course, you want to make sure that you're building the safest possible system, that nobody is in risk. It's going to take a little bit to get those safety records. It's necessary to have the political support to create the regulations, to push through, to build a completely new mode of transportation. Those are the real hurdles, and they're not small, but we're working on several fronts, as I mentioned earlier, so it's happening.
The video said it was feasible and insurable. Do you have to get over a hump of getting people willing to jump on something that's a tube with 700-mile-an-hour jets in it?
No, I mean, you probably have to sign a waiver first, right, so in 3 years, but as soon as we have the safety regulations, that's going to be solved. I would say there's a line, right? There's plenty of people that tell me, don't use monkeys, I want to be first. So, but, I'll be definitely first, so that's already taken.
Taken now. Okay.
Yes, it's, no, I mean, I don't think adoption is an issue, but of course, when we're, while we're designing the system, and especially the capsule, it's all about building something that is very similar to what people already know. So it's going to be probably much more boring than most of you are imagining. So, you don't really feel speed, you feel acceleration and deceleration, and that's going to be adjusted to make you feel very comfortable based on the route. So at the end, it's going to feel like anything else that you already know. That's important.
Sure, thank you. Grace, so many people would ask why NOACA is investing in studying this. We have roads and rail and air and water to take care of, and now we're going to look at this fifth generation transportation. Why?
For many of the reasons that Dirk stated in his presentation and the video that you saw, really NOACA's job is long-range transportation planning. We plan out for 20 years. And we are looking for transportation solutions for tomorrow as well as today. So it becomes more than just about keeping the roads in good repair for now. We've got to think about what makes tomorrow's system work. And I think that's what propelled us to enter into the public-private partnership with Hyperloop Transportation Technologies earlier this year. And the board certainly had some enthusiasm as well as some concerns, and we worked through much of that. And a lot of it came down to funding, and it's a $1.2 million feasibility study. And in the fashion of a true public-private partnership, HTT is picking up half of it, NOACA is picking up half of it. But there's no way that NOACA would have been able to pick up half of it without the partners that I mentioned in my presentation. So we have ODOT, we have the Ohio Turnpike and Infrastructure Commission, and the Cleveland Foundation, who also believe in this as the fifth form of transportation.
Jacqueline, he talked about government and how difficult it can be to work with politicians. What kinds of policies do we need to put into place for the autonomous cars you were talking about and for Hyperloop? Certainly when we talk about Chicago to Cleveland, in the end it's going to say, hey, you're blowing through here without helping us. Governments are going to have a lot to play with this.
So let me just say up front, I'm an academic, not a policymaker. My job is to educate those who then create the data for those decision makers to then make those really tough decisions. But in my view, as a user of the system, I rely in my politicians and governments to make good decisions, to make policies that are in my best interest, to make sure that regardless of the infrastructure, it's safe to use. So I'm looking at that continuing to protect my interests as an individual and a user.
As you study, could a Hyperloop fit seamlessly into what we already have, or would something, buses, trains, rail, have to go away to make room for this?
I actually see Hyperloop as a complement. I have a husband who commutes Cleveland to Chicago. Can you build it faster? The idea of a connection in under half an hour, I can't wait to see the terminals on both ends. And hopefully those are just as efficient. And I think it's a complement. I think it fits.
We're celebrating 50 years of NOACA. Grace, would this be the high point? When you look back over the 50 years, what have been the revolutionary moments, and could this be yet another?
Well, I think when NOACA started, obviously the revolutionary moment at that time was the National Highway System. And we had, I think, 4,500 miles of highway that grew to 41,000 and continues to grow. But I think the watershed moment for us here at NOACA, I think it will be Hyperloop. And I think that will take us through the next few decades and understanding, as Dirk said in his presentation, this opens up an entirely new model for what regional means and where you can live and work and go to school and play.
Dirk, HTT is not alone here. Is competition good for you?
Competition is always good, no? I mean, on the academic side, if you want, so when it comes to, when the word actually comes from walking or running together, right? So for the general public, it doesn't really matter what company succeeds. It's all about that the technology succeeds, and there's probably nobody in the whole world that's as passionate as us besides our competitors. So it's we have the same mindset. We're only just competing, if you want, so for investor money and for projects. But on the other hand, the more companies are there, the more obvious it is to investors also this is happening. The more companies are there, the more progress is being made. You don't want to necessarily be the only one. The worst thing that can happen to us is actually that one of our competitors fails and the other way around. So it's definitely necessary. I mean, we were the first company. We were around 2 years before anybody else. And I remember how people acted then, right? And was just like, you're dreamers. And, now because there are several others, it's not a question anymore. You have in all the different companies, different investors backing it, big companies involved, celebrities if you want so. So it's, it makes it also clear this is something it's real, it's happening now. It's not just some lonely guy in a basement thinking about this should be done, but it's actually development engineers in progress.
There's not somebody else out there with the next best thing already on the drawing board, is there? I mean, MP3s came along before I finished my CD collection. So.
Well, to be honest with you, I hope so. I hope that there's people that do something better, because that's what we're all striving for, right? Solving solutions. And I hope that if there would be a technology that makes Hyperloop obsolete, I would only be happy, because it would mean that we all live better, and it's an involvement. It's just like there was a train, there was a high-speed train, then now there's a Hyperloop, there's going to come the next thing. Maybe it's teletransportation, as we heard earlier, right? Mm-hmm. I think they're still in the very early stages. But again, these things in any case take quite some time. So it has been 5 years that we have been working on this, and it's still not over.
Grace, you said famously, we need Chicago more than Chicago needs us. Kind of a negative way to approach the project, but quite likely true. How do we make them want to be our partner?
First of all, let me tell you that was taken out of context.
Okay. Hey, I just read the article.
Yeah. And it was really about why Cleveland's starting the project and trying to connect to Chicago, and looking at it from ultimately being a mega region. And being a mega region, Chicago would be the center of that mega region, because it already is. And in terms of proximity, you can then connect to Milwaukee, you can connect to St. Louis, you can connect to Des Moines on the west side, you can connect them to Detroit and to obviously Cleveland. We can then move to the east towards New York and towards the south to Pittsburgh. So it kind of what the objective of that comment was to talk about Chicago currently is the hub of the mega region. And so clearly all of the other cities like Cleveland rely more on the hub than the spoke. That's just the way it works. However, Cleveland will still be a very important component because it's going to be the first leg of that spine. And for those of you that have seen my presentation before on how I sort of wanted to convince HTT that this was the right place, when you look at Interstate 80 and 90 going from San Francisco to New York and then from Seattle to Boston, they intersect at 2 points, Chicago and Cleveland. And so that was really the idea around that. And hopefully, Cleveland has a lot to offer, and maybe Chicagoans may not see that right away, but hopefully they will come to see that.
Yeah.
Can I add something?
Please.
So,
So for me, this new mode of transportation has the same or similar potentials, if you want so, that the railroads had. If you go back and you look at that development, right? And specifically in America, I mean, the whole opening of the West was the railroads. And the cities that didn't embrace the railroads today are basically not existing anymore, right? So embracing a new technology like this and being part of that actually makes sure that you are future-proof and can give you a completely new face. So it's not necessarily that Chicago becomes the center, because Chicago and Cleveland basically become one,
Right.
right? So it's I don't know, Chicago, I don't right? So and that's how you need to see it. So it's not that one region will be more. It's literally it becomes one area, right? Because it's like taking the subway.
A lot of people were excited over the idea of no pollution coming from the Hyperloop. I would love to hear from all of you on sustainability, why this works for us. Grace, you can go ahead first. You look excited.
Well, I was actually just going to make one more comment
Oh, go
on
ahead.
the fact
It's your
that.
show.
Sure, no. When we look at Chicago, Cleveland, and the mega region, somebody had to go first. And if we waited for Chicago to go first, they may not have, because they don't perhaps see the need necessarily for a larger mega region at this time. I think we're more visionary in being able to assess that. So that puts us in a good position. In terms of sustainability, in Dirk's presentation, he talked about the fact that it will consume less energy than it makes. So that clearly is very positive for the environment. And the fact that it is clean energy even just doubles down on that. So it will, in fact, be better for us and certainly help us meet our air quality goals. So I'm looking forward to that part of our environmental responsibilities as well.
Jacqueline?
So I have a bit of a different vision of sustainability. I see sustainability as a fundamental reasoning that why wouldn't we do it sustainably? If we do something that's not sustainable, then it's probably just a short-term solution that in some time is going to cost more later. And I just don't think that's being a visionary. I think doing sustainable projects, sustainable solutions are just the right thing to do.
Dirk?
So I think that in general, you know, as Jacqueline said, sustainable means that you can sustain it, right? So we need to think a little bit further than just energy balance when we think about sustainability. And I think we live in exciting times. I mean, especially when it comes to mobility, things are moving ahead. We'll live in a different world just in 10 years from now. Self-driving cars are going to be electric. I think that's pretty much, you know, I feel pretty safe of being able to say that. But it's not only, like, especially in a project like ours, I mean, we think about sustainability not only in terms of we consume energy, we produce energy, and ideally we give some back to the grid, or we work with other areas, but you also have to think about how do you plan, how do you construct, how do you build, where are the components manufactured, are there alternatives to concrete, what are the different ways that you can do these things. So sustainability needs to be, I think, and should be always part of our daily life. Think about everything we do. If we drive an electric car, it's not enough that the car is electric, because the power needs to come from somewhere, right? So that's an important part. So does it come from renewable sources? All of these elements are important, and you know, I think we all have a responsibility, because we're here for a limited amount of time, and there's going to be other people that come after us, and you know, we're just borrowing.
I want to be conscious of your time. We know what time it is. You just talked about 10 years in the future. Grace, 20 years in the future. Where is NOACA? Where is Greater Cleveland in 2040?
Greater Cleveland now is part of the Great Lakes mega region. We can get to Chicago in 28 minutes, so your husband can be home for dinner. And NOACA continues to look for the next revolutionary transportation project.
Short and sweet. Ladies and gentlemen, please give me your time and your hand for our panelists. Thank you for your rapt attention. I'll leave it to you to close.
Thank you very much for all of you attending. I know that there are some written remarks up there, but being conscious of time, I will just say one last time, thanks again to the NOACA staff, and particularly the NOACA staff that helped put this event together, Gail Godick, Cheryl Oneski, Jocelyn Clemmings, and Susanna Merloni. Let's give them a round of applause. And thank you all for being here. We look forward to a terrific future and you being part of it.
Thank you.